With NBT Bank, you can use your home equity line of credit in a few simple steps. Just log into online or mobile banking.
Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story known to exist. The oldest existing versions of this poem dates back to 2000 BC in Sumerian cuneiform, while a complete version dates back to 700 BC in the Akkadian language. Even though the texts themselves were lost for thousands of years, the tale still spread through to Europe and Asia. Even the Greeks and the Romans mentioned King Gilgamesh as late as 200 AD. The story was rediscovered in 1839 by a British archaeologist, Austin Layard, leading to the uncovering of much of the lost Mesopotamian civilizations. So without further ado, let's get into this epic tale. The prologue of the Epic of Gilgamesh starts by introducing us to the hero and his parents. Lady Wildcow, then Sun, was Gilgamesh's mother, a minor goddess that was known for her wisdom. Lukobanda was known as Gilgamesh's father, but we don't know 100% if that's true, as there isn't much mention of him. Gilgamesh was a demigod, part human and part god. He was the king of Uruk, and built grand outer and inner walls that surrounded the city. He was said to have established stunning temples of Anu, the god of the heavens, and his daughter Ishtar, the goddess of war and love. The story begins with Gilgamesh. He is all-powerful and takes whatever he wants from his people and crushes anyone who gets in his way. The old men of Uruk criticized Gilgamesh by saying a king is supposed to protect his people like a shepherd, not pester them like a wild ox. The gods hear their concerns and tell the goddess of creation, Avaru, that since she made Gilgamesh, she must create someone strong enough to challenge him. Avaru uses clay in her own spit and forms it into a man named Enkidu. Enkidu lives in the wilderness with the animals. An important physical trait of Enkidu is his hairiness. Eventually, a hunter sees the wild man at a watering hole. Out of fear, he runs to his house to tell his father about the man, the most powerful of the land. The hunter tells his father that the wild man has disturbed his traps and filled his pits, and now he cannot fulfill his purpose as a hunter. The hunter's father tells his son that he should head to Uruk and ask King Gilgamesh if he could provide a prostitute to seduce the wild man. This plan works, and Enkidu and the prostitute do the deed for 6 days and 7 nights. When Enkidu's wild tendencies are satisfied, he goes back to the animals, but they do not accept him back. as they do not see him as their own and run away from him. Enkidu tries to convince the animals to accept him back, but he has become weaker and can no longer run as fast as he could before. He didn't know what to do, only to go back to the prostitute. The prostitute comforts him and tells of the wonders that he will find in the city of Uruk. She tells him of the food, the festivals, and the king, Gilgamesh, that uses his own people. As soon as he heard about Gilgamesh, he was eager to meet him and challenge him to a contest of strength. The prostitute tells Enkidu that Gilgamesh is too strong and could not win, but said that Gilgamesh is lonely and wishes for a friend. It turns out that Gilgamesh has previously had two dreams about Enkidu. In the first dream, a meteor lands in a field somewhere outside Uruk. He is drawn to the rock, and using his great strength, gives it to his mother and his son, handling it with great care. In the second dream, Gilgamesh finds an axe lying in the street. He was drawn to the axe, and out of appreciation for it, takes it back to his mother, handling it with great care. Gilgamesh's mother tells him that both the rock and the axe symbolizes a man that he will soon challenge, a man that will become his most trusted friend, and a person who had the guidance and power to save Gilgamesh. The temple prostitute shares a pair of garments with Enkidu. These are the first clothes he has ever worn. Then the prostitute leads him on the way to the city of Uruk. On one of the nights, both of them stop at the shepherd's camp. The herdsmen are amazed by Enkidu's size, strength, and good looks. They serve him plates of cooked food, bread, and beer. At first glance, Enkidu does not recognize these objects as food. Only until now he has eaten grass and drank animal's milk. He was hesitant at first, but the prostitute urges him to eat. He gulps it all down and starts to sing. He washes with oil and gets new clothes. He even picks up a sword and guards the shepherd's flocks to keep away the wolves and lions. One day, a stranger comes to the shepherd's camp carrying a decorative dish. Enkidu asks the prostitute to find out who the man was and where he was going. The man tells both of them that he is bringing offerings to a wedding ceremony in Uruk. The groom is not King Gilgamesh, but the man says that Gilgamesh gets to lie with the bride before the husband because Gilgamesh can take whatever he wants because no one can endure his great power. Enkidu is furious and decides to go to Uruk and challenge Gilgamesh, as Enkidu is sure that the king of Uruk is no match for him. When Enkidu makes it to Uruk, Enkidu draws a crowd around him, calling him their champion. Enkidu firmly stands in front of the bride's bedchamber when Gilgamesh tries to force his way in. Both Gilgamesh and Enkidu lock into combat, grappling through the streets, shaking the city as they fight. Eventually, Gilgamesh, proving to be stronger, wrestles Enkidu to the ground. They both forgive each other. Enkidu then admits that Gilgamesh deserves to be king. Gilgamesh's mother gives their new friendship her blessing, proclaiming that Enkidu will be Gilgamesh's trustworthy companion. Both Gilgamesh and Enkidu search for a commendable adventure for both of them to take on. Enkidu tells of a terrible monster named Humbaba, who Enlil, the god of earth, wind, and air, created to guard the distant cedar forest that was banned to humans. Gilgamesh can't wait to take on the beast, while Enkidu warns him that the demon is invincible. Gilgamesh is not deterred, as even if he dies, he would still be remembered for his bravery. Gilgamesh convinced Enkidu that if they managed to kill Humbaba, they would be famous. Enkidu joins in on the adventure, and they prepare to order new weapons, such as massive swords, axes, and bows, for their journey. Before the two heroes set out, they tell the people of Uruk that they are going to slay Humbaba and cut down the cedar trees the monster protects. The elders of the city are furious and tell Gilgamesh that he is going overboard and misjudges Humbaba's strength. They told Gilgamesh if he is still keen on his task, that he should not only rely on his great strength and look to Enkidu, for he knows the wilderness best. They also told him to appease the sun god Shemesh for protection, which he did. Gilgamesh and Enkidu then make their way to Gilgamesh's mother and son for her blessing as well. She praises Shemesh's protection and adopts Enkidu as her son. Gilgamesh and Enkidu are now truly brothers. The two heroes listen to more prayers, rituals, sacrifices, as well as more warnings from the elders. Once all the final preparations are finished, the two heroes set off on their adventure. In 3 days of traveling, they cover 150 leagues. which is the equivalent of 724 kilometers. That would take the average man 3 weeks to walk that far. They finally reach the forest and pause to plan things out. They stand at the forest gates in amazement as they take in all their surroundings. They see a massive mountain in the distance, the place where the gods are installed. They build a small structure to shelter them from the wind and go to sleep. In the middle of the night, Gilgamesh has a dream where a mountain fell on top of him. Gilgamesh explains the dream to Enkidu, and he said that the mountain represented Humbaba, who would lie on the plain like a mountain. Days pass as they make their way through the forest. On their way, they make offerings to Shemesh. Night falls, and they're ready for sleep. Gilgamesh.
Hi, my name's Graydon. I'm 11 years old and I learned how to play guitar on Fender Play.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness.
Hi, Steve here. When my wife and I got married, we went to a seafood restaurant in Southern California where we were living, and we didn't know each other that well yet, but I asked her what she was going to get to eat. She says, I don't know, what are you going to get? I told her a couple of things I really liked, and I recommended it to her that she try that particular seafood too. She told me no, she didn't like that. And I asked her, have you ever eaten it before? And she said no. And I asked her, then how do you know that you won't like it? She told me she never had that kind of food while she was growing up. I couldn't believe she's never tasted any kind of seafood in 20 plus years while she was growing up. But she hadn't. This is exactly the attitude of so many believers. So many Christians. They talk about the book of Enoch like my wife thought about the seafood. I've never read it, but I just know it's not of God. If it was good, it would have been in the scriptures. Or like I said many times before, it was in the scriptures. It was removed from the scriptures, and I know why. Another thing that I'd like to say before I get into this is I'm so tired of the ignorant comments and the almost worshipful attitude some believers have toward the King James Version of the Bible. For all those people that continue to try and push their glorifying exaltation for the King James Version, I just want to let you know that I have a King James Version, but I also have 6 other versions that I use to study, plus online. Using other versions to study can make a big difference in your comprehension. But I have a King James Version, but I also have 6 other versions that I use to study, plus online. Using other versions that I have toward the King James Version of the Bible. For all those people that continue to try and push their glorifying exaltation for the King James Version, I just want to let you know that I have a King James Version, but I also have 6 other versions that I use to study.
The King James Version plus 6 other versions. So that's 7 different versions plus the internet, which means no one has a Bible. Nobody has a Bible. You have a version of the Bible. Matter of fact, you can have 2, 3, 4, or 7 versions of the Bible. But you don't have a real Bible. You don't have an original Bible. There are no original Bibles left in existence unless the Vatican has them. But that's all there is. A version. Now, me and you can watch the same sporting event. You're rooting for one team, and I'm rooting for one team. At the end of the game, me and you ain't gonna have the same version of what happened. It's just not. You know what I'm saying? If we get in a car accident, you driving the vehicle, I'm driving the vehicle. Something happens and our cars collide. Your version of the story isn't going to be the same as my version of the story. Same thing with the Bible. You just get versions of them. No matter how many different copies you have, it's just still just a version. It's not the original. Man, them boiled peanuts and fruit cups is busting on the snack tip right now.
Online. Using other versions to that believers have toward the King James Version of the Bible. For all those people that continue to try and push their glorifying exaltation for the King James Version, I just want to let you know that I have a King James Version, but I also have 6 other versions that I use to study, plus online. Using other versions to study can make a big difference in your comprehension of what the Scriptures are saying. Reading only one version of the Word of God can not only be difficult, but also keep you in the dark about things you don't understand. Here's the best example of what I'm talking about. In 2 Samuel 8:2, we see a verse of Scripture that makes no sense at all until you use a version of the Bible that makes it crystal clear. Look at the King James Version of this verse. And he smote Moab and measured them with a line, casting them down to the ground. Even with 2 lines measured he to put to death, and with 1 full line to keep alive. And so the Moabites became David's servants and brought gifts. Do you know what that means? Do you understand why David did this? Well, to be fair to the King James Version, I'll have to admit to you, I read several other versions of this scripture, and it wasn't much clearer. But one version made it crystal clear. And this is why I study several versions of scripture, to understand the Word of God.
You don't need several versions. I mean, I got a couple different versions. I have a Orthodox Oxford English version, the Jehovah's Witness New Translation, the King James Version, and then I have this other old-ass Bible. But like years ago when I really was studying the Bible, all you gotta do is get a concordance. A concordance. And it's like a Bible dictionary thesaurus all in one. And so it helps you understand different words that have changed or the meanings that have changed over time. But a concordance comes in, is extremely handy when you're trying to study the Bible.
Here's what that same verse in the complete Jewish Bible says. He also defeated Moab, making them lie down on the ground. He measured them with a length of cord. For every 2 lengths to be put to death, he designated 1 length to be kept alive. The people of Moab became subjects of David and paid tribute. Why did he make them lie down on the ground? Because he didn't have a ladder with him to be able to measure them in a vertical position. You see how easy that is? You can measure anything when you lie it on the ground. And it was the 2 lengths of the cord that proved how tall these people were. They were the giants. You could try and argue, well, couldn't David see that already? Apparently David felt there was a certain cutoff point between a tall man and a giant, and he used this measurement to determine that. I'll put a link in the description box below for you to read more about all the different.
But then that's what I say too, like when you really try to explain different events in the Bible, so you're measuring the difference between a really tall dude and a giant, so you can put the giants to death. So there were giants in the Bible, like Goliath. So when you start believing in the Bible, you got to believe in all that shit, right? So you believe in giants and water dragons and men getting swallowed by fish and still coming out the fish 7 days later, and walking on water and turning water into wine, and you know, prophecies and dreams, and you got to believe all that shit.
This is where the giants are mentioned in the Bible. This article not only talks about the giants, but it also proves how the giants corrupted themselves with all of creation, and gives several examples of fossil evidence of giants and how they corrupted the birds, the beasts, the reptiles and the fish as mentioned in chapter 7 of the book of Enoch. Go read it. It's very, very informative.
Yeah.
What would you say if I told you it was the very religious and political people who removed the book of Enoch that you lift to such high and lofty places? Who made the decision to remove or not to include the book of Enoch in the other scriptures? I don't know, but I do know that whoever it was must have been inspired to do it by Satan. The book of Enoch is in the Bible used by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. As far as I know, it's the only one where they have included it. Something we need to keep in mind is that the book of Enoch was written before the rest of Scripture. It was written before Moses or Abraham were even born. The book of Enoch goes into great detail about many things that only the book of Enoch reveals. And the most important part of it is the Bible, in several places, confirms the writings of the book of Enoch. Anyone who ignores the book of Enoch is content and complacent in their ignorance. And in my opinion, ignorance is the greatest commodity in today's world. Much of it is deliberate, and the rest of it is by choice. There's so much information and detail that God has revealed through his prophet Enoch. It's definitely important to know. But the main reason this book has been left out of our contemporary Bibles, no matter what version you have, is because it exposes the fallen angels, the demonic activity of this earth, and the actual creation and the way things really work, instead of how we've been taught and programmed to believe. The devil knows the less you understand about his deception, the easier it is to deceive you and to make you believe the lie. The lie of science as explained by men who only try and label the things that they understand. But the book of Enoch explains everything in a much different way about the sun, the moon, the stars, and what makes them work. Is the earth round or is it really flat? There are some people that are simply too programmed already, and they wouldn't believe the things in the book of Enoch, even if you laid out the most compelling evidence in front of them. The early church knew these things, and it's only been in the last few hundred years or so that the church has been kept in the dark regarding the book of Enoch and the information that it contains.
Enoch is kind of weird because, like you said, he is mentioned in the Bible in a couple of places, but his book isn't in the Bible. But then he's like, I think it's in Genesis when they're given a lineage, and the lineage of Adam, and Enoch is the only person who goes to heaven without dying. It says for everyone else in the Bible, it says their name and who's their father and how old they lived to be, and then they died. And they lived until the age of such and such and died, and such was the son of such and such, the son of such and such, and he lived to this age and died. And when it gets to Enoch, it says that Enoch was the son of such and such, and he lived to be so many years, and then God took him. Didn't say he died. It just says God took him and he walked with God. And it's like, huh? So all these, it's like, okay, he was 87, he died. He was 93, he died. He was 88, he died. Enoch was 75 and he walked with God. So he didn't die, and then everybody else dies, and it's like somehow Enoch was the one person who got to meet God without dying. Him and Moses. It's weird. The book of Enoch is weird. The Epic of Gilgamesh is weird as shit. The Electric Universe is some more weird ass shit, yo. Alright, the Electric Universe is, that's an hour long. Jordan Maxwell. This is one of the first guys back in the day I listened to. There is so many debunking so many people and oh, this guy is a fucking pedophile and a racist, and even Alex Jones was one of my helped lay the foundation of my understanding. Hello? Uh, they probably will, but it seems like everywhere else is extremely expensive. I went to CVS to pick up some things. I got the water from CVS, and they have it. That shit was $26. Like everybody charges like anywhere from $5 to $10 more than like Walmart and Price Chopper. Yeah, I went, and there was somewhere else I went to. Price Chopper has it, but Price Chopper is a little bit more expensive than Walmart. Walmart has it the cheapest. Walmart's like $16, sometimes $17. I think Price Chopper is like $19 or $20, and I saw it somewhere else for like $22, and then I saw it at CVS for like $26. I'm like, yo, what the fuck? I hate going to Walmart all the time, but I see why. Like they got the cheapest prices on everything. Like they're almost, CVS is like $10 more. GNC, I'm pretty sure they would have it, but I'm pretty sure it's probably gonna be more than what Walmart sells it for. Yeah, I guess. And that's what I be thinking about too. Like, where's the cheapest place that's closest now? You know, because Walmart isn't as close, so it's just are you gonna spend $1.50 extra in gas and traffic and sitting in time and traffic trying to get somewhere, or are you just gonna spend the extra couple dollars at the store that's the closest? All right. All right. Yeah, so I listened to Alex Jones a lot back in the day as one of to lay the foundation for my understanding of global conspiracies. Yo, quick draw kid. What up, yo? Uh and so over the years I even stopped listening to Alex Jones. I used to listen to Mark Dice a lot, and I kind of stopped listening to Mark Dice over the years. But Jordan Maxwell is in that group of people who I was drawn to for the information that they were putting out on how the system is actually constructed. And so let's listen to some old Jordan Maxwell to see what he says.
I think the one thing I'd like for you to take away from anything that I say today is this one point, that nothing in this world works the way you think it does. Nothing. The police.
I was listening to Jordan Maxwell over 10 years ago, yo. Like Alex Jones, Alan Watts, David Icke. But and then doing more selective reading, so I started reading like black leaders and psychologists like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Dr. George DeGury, Dr. Amos Wilson, listening to Leo Muhammad and Dr. I can't think of the other Dr. Muhammad's last name, but Dr. Sebi, and just listening to more and more African American people talk about psychology and different things. So I think these guys gave me a really good foundation, but I definitely have expanded my sources of information over the years. But still, looking back, I can see why I was so drawn to these guys, and they do offer a wealth of information.
Who you think they are. The sheriff is not who you think he is. Banks do not do what you think they do. Governments don't operate anywhere near the way you think they do. And that's why today, when you look at what's going on in the world today, none of it makes any sense. It's all crazy. It makes no sense at all. Seems very destructive. But actually, in point of fact, you don't know how the system works. It's working perfectly fine. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and the people, the masses, are entertained with television and alcohol and drugs, and the wealthy continue to get wealthy, and so it's working perfectly fine once you understand how the world really works, and nothing works the way you think it does. My whole life I have been interested in theology and religion, and that's my real love, and I've spent all my awakened hours of research throughout the country and throughout the world studying theology and religion, but not to learn from it, but to learn about it. And it's a fascinating story once you see how our religions came into being, and you begin to see things that you've never seen before, and begin to have questions that never occurred to you before. And so that's been my major love. But I also, in the early 80s, very early 80s, came into contact with some people who were experts on government banking. And I was in their company for many years. And I learned how governments work, and it was absolutely astounding to me to see the real truth. It's taken
USA. 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 America, where we do it right. No, what do they say? America, where we do it wrong until we get it right. What's up, guys? We're listening to some Jordan Maxwell. If you heard of him, you know. If you don't, you'll learn.
48 years to get here tonight, but I'm going to give you a secret that I've learned. I'm going to give this to you for free. This is a secret, and it's a very powerful secret. People will always, financially and in every other way, people will always support what they want to hear, not support what they don't want to hear. If you like country music, you're not going to pay $30 for a rap concert. If you like a particular movie star, you're not going to go see somebody else. People will always, if you like a particular kind of food, you're not going to the opposite restaurant. So people will always support what they want to hear. And the one thing around the world that the ancient peoples and anyone who has traveled and dealt with the public, you will find the one thing that people, generally speaking, do not want to hear is the truth. Nobody is happy when they have to be faced with the truth. And so there are some brave people, like maybe you here today, who are at least open to hear something that may conflict with what you believe or what you know, but at least you're truth seekers. That's what I have always been, as a truth seeker. I always say I'm not the world's foremost authority on anything, because I'm at least smart enough to know how much I don't know. But when you begin to break down how government works, banks work, you begin to see a whole world that you've never known. The word I use is occult. Occult simply means hidden. And this is exactly what is going on in the world today. Our governments, banks, institutions of education, etc., are operating on a totally occult or hidden basis. And so what we are told and given to understand is not the truth. Let me give you an example. How many people have heard me lecture or talk about the maritime system?
This motherfucker, yo, it comes out. It's already out, right? What's the date? They said they're gonna give it out on the 11th. That's 2 days ago. You've already been playing it. Y'all watched like 2-3 hours of the closed alpha all the guys they had for the closed alpha and what the community's been making so far and all the little levels and different characters people have been coming up with. It's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good, son. Yeah. That's awesome. This dude say he's in the beta. Got my code. They emailed me yesterday. I'm in like Flynn, son.
Okay, so most people at least have heard about the subject. For those of you who haven't, I'll just give you some examples. When you go into court, why do you have to go to court? You play tennis on a court. You play basketball on a court. The whole idea in the court is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. So you have a team of lawyers, and they throw the ball back in the other guy's court, and that team throws the ball back in the other guy's court, and the judge is a referee. And he doesn't care who wins or loses. He's going to get paid anyway. So he wears a black robe. Black robes, most people never question, why do Catholic priests wear black robes? Kids that graduate from high school wear black robes. Judges wear black robes. Rabbis wear black robes because black robes represent the planet Saturn. They are a symbol for the planet Saturn. Saturn was called by the ancient people Lord of the Rings. And Saturn is Lord of the Rings. This is why women were told in the ancient world to listen to their God. And the concept was they would wear an ear ring. Men were to get married before their gods. They wear a wedding ring.
Hey, Jordan, don't hit him with all that symbolism, Jordan. What? Why you wear earrings? Huh? When you get married, you put a ring on your finger. Why? Why do you do that? What the fuck does that shit symbolize? It symbolizes my love. No, it don't. No, it don't. You don't know. You don't even know why you do that. You don't know why. You don't know why you wear earrings. You don't know why you wear wedding rings. You just do it because it's a token of my affection. No, it's not. No, it's not. You're worshiping Saturn. It's Saturn worship. Jesus Christ, people. Do you not know this simple stuff? Don't hurt him, Jordan. Why the judges? Why when you graduate, you gotta wear a black robe with a little square hat? What the fuck does the square hat represent? Huh? What the 4 points on the square? Huh? Why the judges wear black robes too, man? Huh? What is all that what that supposed to mean? What does it all mean?
Because the old ancient god of the Middle East, one of the ancient gods of the Middle East, was the planet Saturn. Saturn was directly connected to Yahweh, the Hebrew God. And so this is why even today the Jews celebrate the worship of Saturn. Saturn in the old Phoenician language was called Shebath. Look up in the Phoenician language, you will find that the planet Saturn was called Shebath. And his worship to honor him once a week was called Sabbath. So when the Jews are having Sabbath, they're actually paying homage to their god Saturn, Lord of the Rings. And so when you start breaking down where religions have come from, theologies have come from, the six-pointed star, for instance, is called the Star of David. Actually, it's not the Star of David. All the encyclopedias and reference works will tell you that it's called the Star of Saturn. It is a hexagram. Hexagrams represented the planet Saturn. So, and then when you look at the Christian system of things, the church is a disgrace, in my opinion, period. The Christian church is a disgrace. Everything that comes out of the Christian church in America is a disgrace. It's filled with lies, deception, innuendos. It is a money-making corporation. It operates under maritime admiralty law. And there is a whole world of knowledge that Christians have not been given about the scriptures, about who wrote the Bible, where it came from. I have found that even Judaism is not a BC religion. It did not exist in the BC. So when we talk about ancient Jerusalem, there was no ancient Israel. Jerusalem, yes, but no ancient Israel. So when you think about how preachers and religious leaders talk about ancient Israel this and ancient Israel that, in point of fact, Israel is not a BC religion. The whole concept of the Old Testament was developed right around the 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th century A.D. So that the Old Testament is not an ancient record of an ancient people. There was no ancient Israel. Two of the greatest scholars, archaeologists in Israel, have written a book called Unearthing the Bible. And these two men, these two archaeologists, are the best and the brightest of the archaeologists in Israel. And in their book, basically, that's what they said. There was no Moses, there was no King Solomon, there was no King David. The entire thing was written probably in the 8th, 9th, and 10th century A.D. in Europe. Developed and ultimately taken, all of that was taken by the Jesuits in the Catholic Church and rewoven into a story and given to us today as an ancient Israel. There was no ancient Israel. Never existed. There was no Moses. There was no King Solomon. Solomon was Sol, Om, On. Sol is Latin for the sun. Om is the Hindu word for the creative force. And On is the name of the sun in Egypt. The Greeks call it Heliopolis, but the Egyptians call the city of the sun On. Go look in the dictionary, look up the word On. It will tell you it's the city of the sun in Egypt. This is why you flip a light switch on, because it was a city of light. So you take Sol, Om, On, the three names of the sun in the ancient esoteric languages, it becomes Sol, Om, On, or Solomon. Even in the ancient Bibles, the old Bibles from the 12th, 13th, and 14th century, in the Bible, it didn't say King David. It kept talking about King Druid. And incidentally, the system of government and laws that we live under today in America and in the Western world is a Druidic system. America is a Druidic country. Canada is Druidic. Like I said, Western civilization is a Druidic establishment.
I mean, yeah, there's a higher purpose. And that's the thing, it's being hidden from us through years and years of misunderstanding, misconception, misleading, deviation, control, power schemes, and we're missing a lot of our divinity, our true spiritual nature, and is hidden away from us in a control system called religion. And once you subscribe to any religion, you're already dividing yourself from people who subscribe to another religion. You're placing yourself in a box. When all religions are rooted and based in something that is factual, some connecting consciousness, awareness that we're all a part of, and it's not Judaism or Christianity, Catholicism or Hinduism or whatever, Buddhism, Islam. It's all of it together. It's all of it. And somehow it's been picked apart and translated this way and translated that way, and it's just used to control people. But once you understand this stuff, it is hard to eat this shit if you've believed the lie for so long. And that's the thing. Yeah. Does it go against what we're normally taught to believe? Of course it is. And that's the main reason you should listen to it more. Like why does this sound so different? You know what I'm saying? And then the thing is, where I got to the point in religion is not just to read religion. Let's read history. You know, why was the Bible the first book printed uh, when the printing with the printing press with removable print on that shit? You know, why was the Old Testament and New Testament put under the same cover when it was two separate books? And who really wrote these things? You know what I'm saying? So doing historical research on religion is the hardest thing for religious people to do. You know, believing in the religious text is one thing. Okay, now let's do some real historical research on this text. And it mostly comes up pretty short. A lot of it comes up pretty short. Or the more current text, religious texts that we read are actually based on older writings, older documents, older belief systems that would be considered pagan. But once you see that it's still basically the same thing, you don't want to believe that. So it's weird. It's just, I don't know. I just like to know everything. I want to know every point of view, every piece of information is factual. Any facts. Is that a fact? I like knowing facts. You know, it's a fact that the Quran is based on the Bible, and outside of religious texts, you don't read of these religious characters. Like, their history has been written down and documented for centuries, like well documented. But you can't find these characters written anywhere else except in these religious texts. You know? And if they were real people, it'd be like more common to see their names in other places. If all these great and grand, magnificent things actually happened, the world would have been speaking of it. What? Yeah, Buddhism isn't really a religion. It's yeah, like you said, it's just it's a spiritual system, a way of observing the world. Is more of what Buddhism is. So
The Druids were a very powerful priesthood in Europe, even before the Roman Empire existed. And they were the attorneys, the lawyers, the religious leaders, the politicians. It was called the Druidic system. And one of the most important symbols in the Druidic system was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. And orchestra leaders and conductors use a magic wand. That's a Druid symbol. And the Druid symbol of the magic wand was made out of the wood of a holly tree. It's made out of Hollywood. And the entire establishment in Hollywood is a Druidic system. So if you don't understand Druidic symbol, wood of a holly, and
don't hit them with the holly, with the magician's wand is made out of Hollywood. Come on, Jordan. You're going too deep for him.
Druidic system. And One of the most important symbols in the Druidic system was a magic wand, like Merlin the magician with his magic wand. And orchestra leaders and conductors use a magic wand. That's a Druid symbol. And the Druid symbol of the magic wand was made out of the wood of a holly tree. It's made out of Hollywood. And the entire establishment in Hollywood is a Druidic system. So if you don't understand Druidic symbols, you'll never know what's going on in Hollywood and where they're being financed, who's financing them, how this stuff really works in relation to government. There's an enormous amount of material out on the web showing pictures from motion pictures from 5, 6, 7 years before 2000, before 9/11, in which 9/11 is in motion pictures. And the original film of Matrix, in the original Matrix movie, the star is giving some kind of an affidavit to sign, which is his identification or something. And the camera zooms in on it for just a moment when he's signing it. But if you stop the film, stop it and back it up and zoom in, you will see that the document is about something that is going to happen. It says September 11, 2001. And this was way before September 11, before 9/11. Chris Carter, classic example of what I'm talking about, Hollywood. Chris Carter, the creator of X-Files. When X-Files ended, Chris Carter, the producer, started a whole new television series called The Lone Gunman. And the very first movie was a lead-off movie for the new television series. And in that movie, that came out right around February or March of 2001. February or March of 2001, Chris Carter's new television show called Lone Gunman was started on Fox television. And in the very first episode, it's talking about how factions within the U.S. government were going to fly 757s into the World Trade Center and lock them down purposely. And in the movie, you're seeing the planes going into the World Trade Center. That was back in, 8 months before it even happened. Chris Carter is telling you something in the movie. And in the movie, they ask, well, why are these people in the government doing it? And one of the guys in government said, because we need to control the Middle East, we need to control the oil flow, we need to have a dominant place in the Middle East so that we can promote wars, which is good for business. And but that's in a movie, and it shows the planes going into the World Trade Center. General Electric, about 3 or 4 years before 9/11, General Electric came out with a refrigerator in Italy. And on the face of the refrigerator, painted, were 2 jets flying into the World Trade Center. So it was a World Trade Center and 2 big planes flying into them. And I have many, many pictures from Hollywood showing 9/11 jets flying into the World Trade Center. So all I'm saying is that Hollywood knows what's going on. And this whole thing is being orchestrated from behind the scenes to knock down the World Trade Center. I mean, and the day it happened, I became so depressed, I just dropped out of speaking. I no longer toured, I no longer did radio.
Yeah, I don't know, like, some people go to the extreme and say, like, religion is almost brainwashing, where you're telling kids, God is watching everything you do, and Satan is out to get you, so you better not masturbate, or you're gonna go to hell, and you better not fornicate, because you'll go to hell, and you'll burn in hell forever, for all eternity. And it's like, what the fuck? And then when you look at the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament, they're not really the same God. The God of the New Testament is barely there. He's fairly aloof, and he kind of lets Jesus handle everything. The whole Jesus Immaculate Conception is weird in itself. The whole relationship with God and the devil is weird as hell. The old God in the Bible is mean and vengeful and spiteful and just like a really bad God. And he has like this this genome experiment going on where he's just trying to breed this one family for generations and for whatever reason. And the Old Testament just seems really, really weird. The New Testament is slightly weird. And I don't know, like if you believe in every part of the Bible, I have to question your sanity, because no dude can get eaten by a fish for 7 days and then come out that motherfucker alive. It's like, that can't happen. But it happened in the Bible, and people believe that stuff. And it's like, I don't know. And then, like you say, everything is common sense, basically. Once again, Moses gave us the 10 Commandments, right? But Moses was his family was under siege, and to save his life, his mother placed Moses in a reed basket and set him on a river while her and everybody else got slaughtered. And lo and behold, the Pharaoh's handmaiden found Moses on the river and brought him into the Pharaoh's house, and he was raised in royalty. You know, he was raised like the good life. The family knowing it wasn't their child, he kind of grew up knowing that he wasn't really blood, but still. And now, even in his youth, he accidentally killed somebody. It was an accident. And he fled. He fled the city for repercussions of killing this dude. And then years later, in his later life, he gives us the 10 Commandments that says, "Thou shalt not kill." Well, motherfucker, we already know that. That's why you ran from the crime scene, because you already knew "Thou shalt not kill." What's the point in writing all this stuff down? You know, it's common sense, buddy. And I don't know. It's the Bible is just kind of weird to me. So. But once again, I do think there is a purpose to this thing we call life, to our existence, to us being aware of our mortality. There is a reason for that. There is a reason that we know our life is finite, that we will die. And our consciousness and our awareness, there's a reason for us to contemplate life and death. You know, good and evil. And for us to connect on a deeper level beyond this physical 3-dimensional world that we live in, you know, and try to see that, you know, we are more than just this substance, this matter. You know, is that the only purpose? I have no clue. But it is something to it, and it ain't some white dude with a long ass beard sitting on a throne in the clouds with a big ass book and a feather quill writing shit down all day. That's not what it is. That's not how this shit works. You know, he's not like a souped up version of Santa Claus. That's not God. You know, he's not up there just answering prayers all day. And so that's where my contradiction in most religions come in, is they personify this creative force so much. And that's just kind of human nature. We just want everything to be so relatable so that it's not weird to us. But even just contemplating God and the mind of God and what God mind is one thing, but trying to verbally convey what you personally feel God is just by trying to explain it, you're already fucking it up. Because there is no real way to understand or to explain an infinite mind, an infinite consciousness. You know? Yeah, religion is I mean, this. I'm in America. They say this is a Christian nation. Excuse me. America is a Christian nation. Nation. Oh my God. Damn. Woo! I crack myself up sometimes. Damn, boy. I am a funny motherfucker. I tell you what. Can I say it? Let me just say it one time. America is a Christian nation. See? The irony. The irony of it all. Oh my God. If I was an actor, they would be like blowing like, yo, just say the line, man. Just get it right. Oh, yeah. Religion can be evil. Yeah. Well, America's a Christian nation. Oh, wow. Damn. Oh, shit. Yo. My bad, dude. Damn. My bad. Obviously, I think that dude possessed. Boozy. What it do? No, I just said some shit that I thought was extra funny. Whew. Damn. Man, I should be a comedian. That's a tough one. I used to kind of look into like hauntings and stuff like that. I'm from South Carolina, so they say there's a couple haunted mansions in the states of South Carolina, and ghosts and all that stuff. But I've never really like absolutely seen some stuff. But I know people who say for a fact like there's hauntings. Like the place where I record my TV show is an old military armory built in like 1800s or something like that. But The curators say that that building is haunted for sure, like for sure, and they see these ghosts all the time. And like the last time I was there recording an episode, there's a bathroom all the way at the end of one hallway. So I walked down to we were in the studio, and I told everybody, I was like, excuse me for a minute, I'm going to the bathroom. And so I was going to the bathroom. One of the camera operators said, okay, well, while you're doing that, I'll go do something else. And so we both left out the studio and went in opposite directions. So I went down one way down the hall. She went the other way down the hall. So I went to the bathroom, and I got back to the studio before she did. So she's coming down the hall, and then she comes in the studio, and she sees me, and she's like, oh, Travis. And I'm like, yeah? She's like, I thought I just saw you walking down the hallway. And I'm like, nope. She's like, well, and then she kind of peeked her head back out the studio, and she's like, well, somebody just walked down there. She's like, did you pass anybody? I was like, no. I didn't see anything. And she was like, I definitely saw somebody. She's like, oh, it's probably just one of the ghosts. And I'm like, I don't want to go to that bathroom anymore. If I got to share it with a ghost, like, I don't want to do that. So, I don't know. I've had, like, one kind of, like, what? Water. Like, is you thirsty, ghost? Jesus. I don't know, man. I don't like having no paranormal activities. No visiting poltergeists. No succubus. I don't need nothing, no necromancers, none of that. You know? Can I prove it? Nope. Can I disprove it? Not really.
Of it. Thomas Young first demonstrated the wave nature of light in 1803 with his famed double-slit experiment, and ever since then the world's top minds have debated what the results of this experiment actually mean. Although Young's double-slit experiment is repeated many times every day, we are always left with the same perplexing question that goes to the core of quantum mechanics and even our very understanding of matter. Is light a particle or a wave?
Necromancy.
Experiments have revealed that light has the properties of both a particle and a wave, but how can it be both a particle and a wave? No. Then we find this to be the case for all electromagnetic.
Yeah, I don't want to walk down that hallway and hear no little baby crying in no bathroom. I'm not ever coming to your house, bruh. Never. No. I need to come in the back door that leads into the kitchen or something like that. I'm not walking down that hall. Jesus.
Radiation and all matter. This leaves the world's brightest minds still searching for answers to this basic question. Is matter a particle or a wave? In this video series, you will be shown the solution to our dilemma. In fact, you are looking at that solution right now. The fields shown around the green photon are electromagnetic fields of opposite polarity, with the red field being of north magnetic orientation and the blue field being of south magnetic orientation. it will be proven that this is actually the way that magnetic fields are structured around all matter. This applies from the smallest particles we have discovered to the largest structures in space. If you were to measure these fields with a compass, their magnetic fields would appear identical to the magnetic fields of a bar magnet. This also means that when we measured the magnetic fields of matter with other methods in the lab, we also assumed that matter had a bar magnet type of magnetic field. But this assumption was a mistake. So until now, we have incorrectly assumed that electrons and other matter have a magnetic field shape as shown in this drawing. But we must realize that the fields around an electron, as well as around all other matter, are actually two opposing, bowl-shaped electromagnetic fields. Unless we properly understand this basic magnetic field structure, we will never be able to properly understand the fundamental forces of matter from the subatomic to the galactic. In this presentation, you will be shown that correcting this one basic misunderstanding of magnetic fields also explains most all of our problems in physics and astrophysics. I believe that this magnetic field structure is an intrinsic property of all matter. Therefore, you cannot have a particle of matter unless these magnetic fields are there to form it and confine it. To further understand these magnetic fields and validate this new theory, hundreds of experiments were conducted utilizing a vacuum chamber and specially constructed bowl-shaped magnetic field emitters. When 70,000 volts of electricity is applied, the plasma formations that you are now seeing appear. A variety of purging gases were used in these experiments. This includes ordinary air, argon, hydrogen, and helium. The spacing and orientation of the magnetic field emitters were varied in many ways as well. The magnetic field emitters were suspended on non-conductive, high-strength microfilament line attached to magnetic supports on the inner surface of the vacuum chamber. Then, to hold these supports in place, high-strength magnets were utilized on the outer surface of the vacuum chamber. This arrangement allows for the adjustment of the magnetic field emitters while the experiment is running. The small microfilament support lines also offer minimum disturbance of the plasma flow around the fields and therefore a more realistic experimental result. A variety of bowl-shaped magnetic field emitters were utilized in these experiments in order to reveal how changing the geometry of the field emitters affects the matter around them. As you can clearly see here, a change of magnetic field emitter geometry also results in a change in the shape of the plasma formation within the vacuum chamber. By adjusting the exposure settings on the camera, an X-shaped pattern is revealed between the magnetic field emitters that is amazingly similar to the shape of the Red Square Nebula. You can even see the bowl shape of the magnetic fields in the Red Square Nebula. Notice how increasing the spacing between the magnetic field emitters transforms the shape of the nucleus until finally a disk of plasma forms around the nucleus. Also notice the rapid spin of the plasma around the magnetic field emitters, even though the field emitters are stationary. Here you can clearly see how even a single magnetic field emitter controls the shape of the plasma around it. Notice how it confines the plasma to the lower part of the vacuum chamber. In preparing for this research, I pondered what other geometries of bowl-shaped magnetic field emitters would be beneficial for this research. I carefully studied the structures in space for guidance in the design of a new bowl-shaped field emitter. From the structures in space to the structures of matter revealed in the collision.
It was no longer the center of the universe. It was a tiny part of the Milky Way sun. The Earth was once the center of the universe. It was flat. Then it was round, and it circled the sun. It was no longer the center of the universe. It was a tiny part of the Milky Way. The Milky Way was the only galaxy, except it wasn't. It was only one of billions of galaxies floating in space without end. Every single time we think we've got it all figured out, we realize we've merely found another piece of the picture. It is a big picture, with many pieces. Sir Isaac Newton was the first to state the law of gravity. Eventually, everybody agreed that gravity alone formed galaxies and stars and planets, and that gravity alone holds the universe together. Then we discovered a force 1,000 billion times more powerful than gravity. Until recently, we believed that the space between the stars and planets was empty, a vacuum. We now know it is teeming with charged particles. We see glowing electric filaments spanning millions of light years. We see stellar and galactic formations shaped by magnetic fields. Only electric currents create magnetic fields. possible that the predominant force in the universe is not gravity, but something else. Discoveries in space have amazed and perplexed astronomers. Current popular theories in the sciences can neither predict nor explain the phenomena we are now observing. A new theory is being proposed. A theory which can both predict and explain the data coming back from deep space. Its implications are profound and affect all the scientific disciplines. It is in fact a synthesis of the disciplines. A synthesis which has already led to discoveries that link modern astronomy, leading-edge plasma physics, and ancient mythology. The electric model offers us a new interpretation of the workings of the universe, the history of our solar system, and even human history.
The rise of science was a triumph over mythology, over magic and superstition. That's why the word science today implies reliability. The word myth means fiction, not true. And it turns out that the key to understanding the myths is the same key that is now helping us to understand objects in deep space. To understand the workings of the physical universe. That key is electricity. It was 33 years ago that I first began to wonder about these preposterous stories told around the world, what we call world mythology. What was it that provoked this incredible outpouring of human imagination just a few thousand years ago, just before the birth of the first civilization? I came to a radical conclusion that the myths arose from extraordinary natural events. Our early ancestors witnessed things in the sky that are not seen today. The events were awe-inspiring, both beautiful and terrifying. So it shouldn't surprise us that the myths are so incomprehensible. Well, of course they're incomprehensible. The celestial references are no longer present.
In 1994, that I was invited to come to the US to attend a conference which was dealing with the possibility that the ancient sky, as witnessed by our earliest forebears, was different to the one we see today. I'd been interested in this kind of idea because it could only be explained in terms of electromagnetic influences within the solar system. So it came as a bit of a shock and a surprise to see David Talbot showing slides at one of the sessions at the conference, which I recognized immediately as being similar to those of electric discharges in the laboratory.
It was wonderful for me personally to come to my first Chronia meeting and hear Dave Talbot And I still want to see some of those slides that he showed again and again and again that explained the white crown of Egypt and the rest of these things that he showed us, all from mythology, all from thousands of years ago. These things clearly were seen by civilizations that never talked to each other from the far corners of the earth. It all just clicked together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle in my mind.
A breakthrough for me came when I realized that many different cultures spread around the world use different words, different symbols, different myths to describe precisely the same formations in the sky.
The Ouroboros, or celestial serpent, biting its tail, for example, occurs on every habitable continent, but it has no ties to the world we now observed. Like all of the archetypes, it is part of an alien sky. A cosmic column rising to the center of the sky, holding aloft the wheel of heaven. And much more than a wheel, because this was the revolving cosmic temple, the city of the gods, the kingdom of heaven, always resting on the cosmic column. Then there's the image of the four rivers or pathways radiating from the center of the sky out to the boundary, the rim of the wheel. The simplest forms lead you invariably to the full story of world mythology. The hero's journey unfolds as the story of the wheel's axle. The mother goddess finds her identity in the star at the summit, the hub and spokes of the wheel.
From childhood on, I've always had a deep interest in mythology, and I remember that as a child I was trying to draw up genealogies of the gods as provided in Greek mythology, and I soon found out that it didn't work, nor did anything else in mythology seem to work. There was no singular fitting explanation that would make sense of these stories. So I basically laid this whole subject to rest, and I didn't look at it for many years, until I came across the work by Dave Talbot and Everett Cochran mainly, whose articles were real eye-openers for me. And as soon as I began to read these articles, it became clear to me that we were really looking here at a very important key to the unlocking of myth. And the recent findings provided by plasma physics are capable of providing that key. Based on the results we have seen so far in Dr. Perret's investigations with petroglyphs, which he matched successfully to laboratory experiments involving plasma, it has now become crystal clear and I think undeniable that the morphology of plasma, as it manifests itself both in the laboratory and in space, can account successfully for the major themes in mythology.
To find the true meaning of the myths, we follow a forensic approach. The purpose is to expose the points of agreement between the different cultures, because here at the level of the archetypes, everything is unified. There are no isolated themes of myth at the level of the substructure. This is like a holograph. Follow one archetype and its links to other archetypes, and you will find one story told around the world.
Well, most physics revolve everything around gravity, but these guys are trying to revolve everything around cosmic electricity that produces electromagnetic fields which produce gravity, if that makes sense. So yeah, gravity, I guess gravity holds us to the planet, but what makes the electromagnetic field which makes gravity possible? Cosmic electricity? I don't know. Or is it just gravity itself? I don't know. What is gravity? Nobody really knows. what is gravity? Gravity is the distortion of time-space caused by dark matter. Oh, what the fuck does that mean? Huh? I don't know. But what makes gravity? Is it electricity? Is it dark matter? Is it antimatter? Oh man. This astrophysics stuff is kind of hard, yo. So I'm just saying, man. I'm just saying. You gotta trust Newton or Einstein or these guys. Doctor who everybody keeps quoting. Damn, I forget his name, just slipped my mind that fast.
Throughout almost all of history, we have regarded the states of matter as being solid, liquid or gas.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last century or so,
Hello? Okay. Dang. All right. You don't have to worry about it. I'll get it tomorrow. All right.
have found that there is a form of matter where the charged particles within atoms are separated to some degree or another, and that is known as a plasma. It is the fundamental state of matter.
It was not until the second half of the 20th century
in atoms are separated states of matter as being solid. Throughout almost all of history, we have regarded the states of matter as being solid, liquid or gas. But in the last century or so, we have found that there is a form of matter where the charged particles within atoms are separated to some degree or another, and that is known as a plasma. It is the fundamental state of matter.
It was not until the second half of the 20th century that we came to realize the role of plasma in the universe. And this has changed the picture of space completely. Not long ago, we thought of the physical universe as being constituted fundamentally of nothing more than atoms and empty space. But a plasma includes at least a percentage of charged particles, protons and electrons, that are not bound to any atomic structure. And plasma is an excellent conductor. Electrons will move efficiently in the direction of charge equalization, and that's an electric current, of course. Now, the reason why we see magnetic fields everywhere we look in space is because electric currents produce magnetic fields, and only electric currents produce magnetic fields. But astronomers working only with gravitational equations did not anticipate the discovery of pervasive magnetic fields in deep space. Electric currents also account for the abundant filamentation of space plasma. First, the electric currents produce the magnetic fields. Then these fields confine the electron flow to narrow paths. Such current paths, or filaments, are called Birkeland currents, named after the pioneer Christian Birkeland. They are typically braided just like the twisted wires of transmission lines on Earth. Well, that's their role in space, to conduct electricity across vast distances, creating the astonishing structures we observe in every direction.
None of these structures were anticipated by gravitational theory, and none are indicated by the behavior of neutral gases in a vacuum.
In any theory of the universe, plasma is extremely important because it has been found since the space age that it makes up 99.99% of the visible universe. So our inexperience with it on the Earth's surface is rather crippling when it comes to trying to decide on a cosmology to explain the visible universe. Now, plasma behaves rather oddly compared to normal matter, the matter we find, the solids, liquids and gases on Earth. If you look at a novelty plasma ball, you will see that it forms these bright filaments that dart all around inside the globe. And if you look closely at them, you'll see that they're actually twin filaments twisted together. In other words, nature finds it efficient to be able to transfer energy over a distance by twisting two pairs of filaments together. And this is a characteristic of the way plasma carries electric currents in space. And one of the puzzles that has faced astronomers since the space age is the discovery of filamentary structures in galaxies, around stars, even the cometary tails of planets and comets themselves. These filamentary structures have come as a surprise. We now have plasma physicists who are doing important experiments in laboratories around the world, and one of the virtues of plasma experiments is that they can be scaled over an enormous number of magnitudes. In other words, a discharge phenomenon that may be seen in the laboratory that occupies only a few centimeters can be scaled up to the size of a galaxy, and you will see the same structures. Now, this introduces a new area into cosmology where we can do experiments on Earth which can verify our ideas, our theories about how the rest of the universe works.
Some of the natural consequences of electric cosmology are the patterns that we see, both in the laboratory and in the sky. A very good example of this is the work of Dr. Anthony Peratt, who was a graduate student of the very famous Hannes Alfvén, who was really the father of electric cosmology. Peratt simulated on a supercomputer using just a cloud of electrical charges and a magnetic field, just using the laws of electrical science, not using anything to do with gravity. He simulated what looked like a spiral galaxy. And the interesting thing is that Peratt's spiral galaxy in the laboratory had exactly the same rotational properties as the real spiral galaxies that we see in the sky do.
Plasma was named by Irving Langmuir because of its lifelike qualities. In other words, the similarity to blood plasma gave rise to the term plasma now used in the sciences. Well, this has incredible meaning for us because of the nature of the metamorphosing. The God who is now an eagle, now a serpent or dragon, now a leonine figure with long flowing hair. These figures take on a whole new meaning when we can interpret them with the benefit of plasma science.
The new instrumentation that was developed in the space age expanded our ability to perceive things, perceive facts. We could now see things in the entire electromagnetic spectrum instead of just the narrow sliver of visible light.
You see the actual movement of deployed when we take the switch to deploy it. It's so cool.
And we had sensors that were out in space. We were freed from the geocentric and anthropocentric order that had prevailed before. universe, and theoreticians are still trying to look at it through, a friend of mine says they're peering through the wrong end of the telescope and telling us what they imagine they see.
Modern cosmology gives us a rather disconnected view of the universe. In other words, we are separated star from star by vast distances. Light takes a long time to travel between stars and across galaxies, and therefore we look upon ourselves as isolated and disconnected. The electric universe takes a different view. It says that we are a part of the sun's environment, electrical environment, and the sun is a part of the galactic environment, and the galaxy itself is strung, like all galaxies, on huge electric currents flowing through the universe.
One of the typical questions that plasma cosmologists hear all the time is, how do you know what's out there in space? How do you know there's electricity out there in space? Is there energy out there in space? Why should we consider anything more than gravity? And the answer is that through the years, we've used optical telescopes, but recently we have what are called radio telescopes, and we've broadened the spectrum that we can look at the sky with. And those radio telescopes can measure electric currents and magnetic fields, and we can determine from those measurements the strength of the electric currents, the strength of the forces involved, and the amount of energy that's stored out there in space.
The two major pillars of modern cosmology are based on the theories of relativity and quantum theory, and yet, as Einstein himself noted, the two are incompatible. And that may be because the theories of relativity deal with matter as if its only consequence is the bending of space. The electric universe, on the other hand, deals with the electrical structure of matter at the subatomic level and then works its way up through living systems, if you like, planets, stars, galaxies, and the entire universe, and shows that it is the electrical structure of matter that forms the amazing shapes we see in deep space. We can demonstrate the existence of these currents flowing between galaxies and between stars by the presence of the magnetic fields they generate. Magnetic fields are threaded through space at all dimensions, within the solar system, on the surface of the sun, between stars, and within galaxies, and even between galaxies. Now, a magnetic field can only be generated by electric currents. So in other words, to continue that magnetic field for any length of time requires that there be electrical power input into those magnetic fields. And that raises the whole question of where does this power come from?
Modern cosmology is highly mathematical. In fact, we were joking before about the idea that the only people who understand cosmology are professional cosmologists. The basis of cosmology, really, if you hunt for it, lies in Einsteinian relativistic mechanics. And when Einstein promulgated his ideas, he totally and completely ignored anything electrical. And so the modern cosmology, with all of its ideas of omega and expanding universe and inflation theory and the Big Bang and all the rest of it, are predicated on a foundation which ignores almost half of man's knowledge about the way the universe works, which is electricity.
It may sound like I'm dismissing Einstein and his theories of relativity out of hand, but we have to give Einstein credit for his integrity in pointing out that his theory did not meet his requirements, and that is that his theory had to be tied back to some form of reality. And there is no explanation as to why matter should curve space to give the effect of gravity. He felt that quantum theory, being a probabilistic theory, divorced cause and effect. And this is one of the things you cannot do in physics, is divorce cause and effect. Otherwise, you might as well give up and get a real job. But this is a puzzle that dogged Einstein through his later years, to the point that his followers tended to go off and use his geometrical explanations to conjure up things like black holes and neutron stars and so on, and the expansion of the universe and the Big Bang, without referring back to Einstein, who with great integrity said he wasn't satisfied with his explanation. One of the problems faced by astronomers after the space age began was to explain the discovery of very concentrated outbursts of energy in deep space. And that meant for them, since gravity is the only driving force available to them, that they required an infinite concentration of mass, because gravity is an infinitely weak force.
The black hole, as Wheeler originally visualized it, sucked everything, including light, in, and so therefore it was invisible. So he could postulate its existence, and we couldn't see it. And because we couldn't see it, we couldn't prove that it wasn't there. Later on, in order to explain these fantastic emissions of energy from galaxies, it was proposed, and I believe it was Stephen Hawking who did it, that there were various types of black holes, some of which actually then spat matter back out again in jets. Because, why? Because we had observed jets.
In the electrical model, it's quite simple. If you think about it, the power that's expressed in your own home, in the heaters and the electric motors and the lighting and so on, is actually generated at a vast distance away from your house. In deep space, the same thing is true. The energy which we see concentrated in these events which are attributed to black holes and so on can more easily be explained as the confluence of electric energy from different parts of the same galaxy or even from other parts of the universe. And it is this explosive release of energy which forms the vast jets that we see lit up and exploding from the centers of active galaxies.
We also have observed double radio sources either side of galaxies. And that event was predicted by Hannes Alfvén, the founding father of modern electrical cosmology, and is still to this day unexplained by standard cosmology. One of the most interesting phenomena in the sky is the so-called pulsar. The pulsar is an object that is observed to put out pulses, both of light and radio activity, RF, in the RF spectrum, and those pulses are extremely rapid. They are something like milliseconds apart, so it's like a extremely fast strobe light. And thinking of a strobe light, astronomers immediately leapt to the lighthouse kind of analogy, something that must be spinning around, the beam is going around, and it's going around so quickly that this thing goes flash, flash, flash. Well, once the repetition rate of the pulsars was observed to get up to in the millisecond range, that meant that this star that was putting out this beam of radiation would have had to be rotating at 300 times a second. And 300 times a second, we're talking about the speed of a dentist drill. So the astronomers decided, well, normal stars couldn't possibly rotate at that speed, and so they postulated the existence of what they called a neutron star. A neutron star is a star that is so dense that it holds together so well that it can indeed rotate at the speed of a dentist's drill. Well, the problem is that in nuclear chemistry, we know that you can't pack neutrons together that densely. They will all fly apart instantaneously. There's a principle called the island of stability in nuclear chemistry that absolutely prevents that. So here again we have the standard astronomers or astrophysicists going directly against another well-developed science. In the electrical model, however, there's a very simple explanation for pulsars. Everybody is familiar with the idea that the pulses can travel back and forth on electrical transmission lines. Such uncontrolled pulses, for example, were responsible for the famous Northeast blackouts. A similar effect can occur between two binary stars connected by a plasma. The two binary stars act like capacitors that store charge. And if you reduce that in size to something you can produce in the laboratory, you can produce it in the laboratory, and it's called a relaxation oscillator. And electrical engineers use it and have used it for decades. The idea of producing pulses every few milliseconds is a sophomore level experiment in an electrical engineering laboratory. It doesn't require neutronium, strange matter, or any other fictitious device. All it requires is two capacitors, a battery, and a nonlinear resistor. And we maintain that that's exactly what a binary pair of stars connected by a plasma field presents. A typical ion in the solar wind, hydrogen nucleus, moving about 20 kilometers per second, which is relatively slow for the ions in the solar wind, in the magnetic field of the sun, experiences potentially magnetic forces that are something like 10 million times the strength of the gravitational force on that same ion from the sun. An interesting demonstration that illustrates very readily the relative strength of magnetic force and gravitational force is the simple idea of a ball bearing sitting on a wooden table. The entire mass of the Earth is pulling downward on that little ball bearing, and that's what prevents it from flying out into space. But a child can come along with a little horseshoe magnet and click, pick that ball bearing up instantly.
The space age presents us with an interesting paradox. The technology of science is really quite extraordinary, and technology has taken us out into space, taken us to the moon, taken probes to distant planets, opened up whole new vistas in remote space with new telescopes and new ways of measuring what's happening in space. But the picture of theoretical science is much different. And many decades ago, assumptions began to crystallize in the theoretical sciences, beginning at the top, the queen of the sciences, as we say, which is cosmology. These theoretical assumptions have constrained all of the other theoretical sciences. Cosmology deals with the big picture questions, the first questions. How did the universe begin? What is it made of? How will it end? And so many popular theoretical constructs, from the Big Bang to string theory to dark matter and black holes, the formation of stars, formation of galaxies, all have arisen from assumptions first postulated by cosmologists. At the same time, these assumptions have defined boundaries for other theoretical sciences, working down from astronomy and astrophysics to the space sciences, solar theory, even Earth history, even human history, have all been confined by these boundaries established by the queen of the sciences, cosmology. The sun just dominates our sky as the source of light and warmth and life itself on Earth. This preeminence of the sun is so clear and obvious that it remains a mystery why virtually every ancient culture insisted that before the present sun there was a quite different luminary ruling the sky. The central sun, the superior sun, the best sun, the motionless sun. And all of these cultures, whatever may be the meaning of these traditions, are insisting that the sky has changed. Of course, our ideas about the sun have continually changed. Only a few centuries ago, the sun was a campfire or ember in the sky. Then, early in the 20th century, under the influence of gravitational theory, the sun was seen as a gravitationally collapsing nebular cloud. age, astronomers began to visualize the sun in terms of a nuclear furnace hidden at its core. But now we're in the age of plasma science, with discoveries of the electric currents in space. And it's inconceivable that these discoveries would not change the picture of the sun again.
Plasma cosmologists have been able to demonstrate experimentally and also in the supercomputer that galaxies are an electrical phenomenon, which raises the question about stars, and in particular our own sun, which is the closest star to the Earth, of course. Any theory of the sun has to explain how it could continue to burn for billions of years, and also explain its present size based on its known mass. And of course, as soon as nuclear energy was discovered, it was grasped immediately as the energy source of the sun. But all of that assumes that the sun is disconnected and an isolated body, and that it must consume itself over its lifetime to provide the heat and light that we receive from it. But if the sun is connected to the rest of the galaxy in an electrical sense, it doesn't require to burn itself at all. And the energy that we receive is actually being received from the galaxy, and the sun is acting as a focus for that energy.
The sun is actually a fairly typical star. And so if we want to understand stars and cosmology, we really have to understand the sun. And the standard model of the sun, so-called, that astronomers are so very proud of these days, really doesn't explain very much about the sun. Why is there a corona in the first place? Everybody knows about the corona, the beautiful corona that we see during solar eclipses. Why is it there? It's clearly an electrical phenomenon.
One of the greatest puzzles about the sun has been, with a surface temperature of 6,000 degrees, high above that surface we have temperatures of millions of degrees. And the question has been, how do we get the energy from the center of the sun somehow past that surface to heat the upper atmosphere of the sun to millions of degrees? In the electric model, you don't have that problem, because if the energy is arriving from outside the sun, the first place you expect to see that energy expressed is above the sun in its tenuous atmosphere. And that is the place where particle acceleration occurs, and the apparent temperature goes very high indeed, up into the millions of degrees.
The fact that the particles in the solar wind accelerate, that is to say, increase their velocity with increasing distance away from the sun, the farther away they get, the faster they go. And the fact that those particles are indeed charged particles leads me, as an electrical engineer, to come to the immediate conclusion that this is an electrical process. In the solar model, think of the sun as being a positive anode, very high voltage body that obviously would emanate an electric field. And if you put a charged particle in an electric field, it will accelerate. That's the way we accelerate particles here on Earth. It's the way every physicist and electrodynamicist has ever increased the velocity of a charged particle, is put it in an electric field.
One of the features we observe on the sun, which have no business being there, according to the standard model, are sunspots. The most significant thing about a sunspot is the fact that the center of the sunspot is dark. And if the sun is trying to radiate energy from its core into space, we should expect that it is bright.
And if you think about that umbra, that darkest place in the center of sunspots, that's the place where we can see deepest into the sun. And just consider the fact that at that point where we can really see down into the sun, that's the absolute coldest place that we are able to measure. If the center of the sun is really a nuclear fusion furnace, it should be the hottest, because we're closest to the source, and it's not the case. astronomer, why are there sunspots? Why are the umbra dark? They will blame it on some sort of warped, twisted magnetic fields. They will say that it has to do with the solar dynamo, all of which lurk unseen like a big genie somewhere below the surface. These phenomena are only to be expected if the sun is electrical in nature. Astrophysicists make the claim that the solar fusion model has indeed been tested in the laboratory, and nothing really is further from the truth. Although each of the steps involved in the hydrogen to helium fusion reaction have indeed been verified experimentally, the overall experiment, the overall reaction, has never been produced in a continuous laboratory experiment. Continuous hydrogen to helium fusion has not been attained in the lab. The strength, in fact, of the electric cosmology is that indeed all of the mechanisms that the electrical people talk about have indeed been verified over decades, in fact, at least a century in the laboratory. The plasma scaling is well known, and plasma and electrical experiments have verified every step of the way. There are any number of observations that are have ad hoc present explanations, but really have no explanation in the standard model, and are natural consequences of the electrical model. For example, heavy elements, the solar spectrum, the neutrino deficiency, the neutrino variability, solar atmosphere, differential rotation by latitude, differential rotation by depth, equatorial plasma torus, sunspots, sunspot migration, the sunspot penumbra, and the sunspot cycle itself. Magnetic field strength, the even magnetic field, helioseismology, the solar density, and the changing size. All of the observations that in that list are natural consequences of the electrical sun model. Standard astronomers tend to pass them off as being inconsequential difficulties that will eventually someday be solved. I maintain, and so do our colleagues here, that these are not inconsequential, but are rather death blows to the solar fusion model, because they are important. They're not secondary, they're primary falsifying observations for that failed nuclear fusion model.
What I find so fascinating about the electric model of the sun is not just that it's a challenge to long-standing theory, but that it opens the door to the ancient world, to an electric sky. The electromagnetic phenomena that we now observe on the surface of the sun and in the vicinity of the sun are direct pointers backwards to the plasma formations that were seen above the ancient sky worshippers.
Electrical currents in space can either be invisible or they can be visible. If they're very diffuse, in other words, there's very little energy per cubic meter, they will be invisible. But where that energy becomes concentrated, it will begin to glow. And we see this kind of thing in the ion tails of comets, for instance. Where the energy becomes very concentrated, we begin to see arcs and sparks, if you like. Electrical discharge phenomena. The standard theory of comets comes from the view that the solar system was formed from a rotating cloud of gas and dust, and that the planets, in some fashion as yet unexplained completely, formed from most of that gas and dust, but there were leftovers. And the leftovers are beyond sight, outside the solar system, in a hypothetical Oort cloud, as it's called. We have no observational evidence for such a cloud. The electric universe model of comets is that they are actually parts of well-differentiated planetary bodies that have in the past suffered from electrical plasma discharge machining, and that some of the surface material has been wafted into space, so it is expected to be rocky. The second thing is that because comets trace a elongated orbit, both away from the Sun and towards the Sun, in that trajectory its charge changes, its voltage changes. Since it spends most of its time in the outer solar system, the voltage that it has reflects the voltage in the outer solar system. But as it hurtles towards the Sun, as it enters towards the Earth's orbit, the voltage is changing rapidly, and the comet has to respond to that by beginning to discharge. And that's where we see the familiar cometary phenomena of the coma and the various tails that it produces. This creates a very distinct difference between the two models.
Hello? Yeah.
Standard model of a comet, which is supposed to be dust and ice left over from the formation of the solar system, and the electrical model, which says that a comet is an electrical body which begins to discharge as it enters the inner solar system. Ever since we've begun to look at comets in close-up, and Halley was the first one that was observed by several spacecraft close-up, it was found to astronomers' surprise that the material coming off the comet was coming in discrete jets and seemed to be coming from what looked like circular areas on the crater. But the imagery wasn't sufficiently sharp to be able to tell exactly what was going on. This required the standard model to come up with an idea that maybe the surface of the comet is coated in black tarry substance or something which was preventing the material from just evaporating from the surface and forming jets as it burst through the surface. But when later images were looked at as we passed other comets, it was found, to astronomers' amazement, that they were seeing very sharp relief. It wasn't like a melted ice cream, it was looking like a piece of heavily cratered rock. Now this fits the electric model of the electrical discharge birth of such a body. In other words, there's very little distinction between an asteroid and a comet, other than its orbit. It was in this context that I looked at Comet Tempel 1, which was chosen as the target for an impact. And the idea was that the impact would create a small crater which could then be photographed by the passing spacecraft, and we could determine whether the material was ice or dust or rock based on the size of the impact crater. It seemed to me that if this comet was a charged body, there would be several other effects that were unexpected. Principally, as a metal copper object approached the comet, there should be an electric discharge to that copper projectile. In other words, there would be an initial flash, and then there would be the impact itself. And the impact, I suggested, would be far more energetic than was expected, because it would tend to concentrate the electrical discharge in the area of the impact. And also it may change the nature of the jets nearby. So it was with great interest I awaited the results of the impact and watched it on television. Before the impact, the astronomers in the assembled control room were worried that they wouldn't see anything, that the impact would result in a very small puff of dust, and that would be the end of it. So when the impact occurred, they were surprised by two things. One was that there was an initial flash, followed by the main impact, which was so energetic that some of the sensors were almost swamped, and the passing spacecraft was unable to achieve its primary aim, which was to photograph the crater. A part of the surprising brightness of the dust released from the impact with Comet Tempel 1 was due to the fact that it was so intense and so widespread. And one of the initial findings was that it seems to be very finely divided dust. Now this is the same thing that was found at Comet Halley, and it was a surprise then, so it's rather surprising that they are surprised once more. The point is that an electrical discharge on the surface will release material, dusty material, very finely divided. It's a technique that's used in sputtering of metals onto, for instance, astronomical mirrors. So this production of a very fine dust is to be expected in the electrical model. But in the standard model, you are asking ices to evaporate or to sublimate, and in doing so to drive off pre-existing dust grains. So there's no way that the dust can be finely divided. It will be in its pristine state. So the production of this great cloud of very fine dust is rather inexplicable in the standard model. The electrical model of comets was driven for several people by Velikovsky's challenge that the solar system had electromagnetic forces to be taken into account. And one of the early pioneers in addressing this issue of comets and electrical phenomenon was Ralph Jurgens. When he proposed the electrical model of the Sun, it implied that all bodies in the solar system must have, to some degree, a cometary appearance or a cometary effect associated with them. Ralph Jurgens, in his model of the Sun, showed that bodies moving radially towards or away from the Sun would experience electrical forces which could induce a cometary display, that is, a visible display. Also working in later years with Ralph Jurgens was Dr. Earl Milton, and he made some predictions and statements about the impact of Comet Shoemaker Levy 9 fragments with Jupiter. And his view of the electrical nature of those impacts was also vindicated. In the electrical model of the solar system, anybody moving away from or towards the Sun at any great rate, for example like a comet, will experience electrical effects which result in a cometary appearance, and that could apply to a planet. Now Velikovsky, in his research, found that Venus was described as a stupendous comet at some point in ancient times. So it was very gratifying for him to be able to announce at the conference in 1974 that astronomers had discovered what they called a cometary tail of Venus. Some years later, it was announced that it was discovered that stringy things were coming from Venus. And of course, this was confirmation to the electrical model because plasma currents flow in strings. This discovery of a cometary aspect of Venus raises the issue of the intense heat we find on Venus. That intense heat is not well explained at all by any idea that the planet is somehow a twin of the Earth's. It raises the distinct possibility that Venus has had a far more dynamic history than we've been taught.
Our ancient ancestors were obsessed with the comet. Let the slightest wisp of a comet appear in the sky and all of humanity was thrown into terror. But why was this? Cosmic catastrophe that inspired the ancient words and phrases for the comet. The comet was the torch of the sky, the sword hanging over the world, the spiraling serpent or dragon, the spiraling sidewalk or ribbon. The angle angry or lamenting goddess soaring across the sky, her hair disordered and blowing in the wind.
Anyone exploring the roots of the ancient comet fears is going to run into the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, the controversial theorist who suggested that, well, there's a reason for the fears of comets around the world. We experienced this horrific cometary catastrophe. The world was devastated by a comet just a few thousand years ago. And Velikovsky went further. He said that not that long ago, planets appeared in the sky with comet-like attributes. In particular, he named the planet Venus as the great comet of antiquity. Both Walt Thornhill and I disagreed with many components of Velikovsky's reconstruction, but we also felt that Velikovsky had nailed certain principles that can help us to understand the early cultures. In particular, Velikovsky was correct in naming the planet Venus as the Great Comet. And the cometary language of Venus goes far beyond anything that Velikovsky himself published.
In every corner of the world, the language of the comet and the language of Venus are identical. Venus as serpent or dragon. Venus as torch of the sky. Venus as long-haired star. Venus as bearded star. The Sumerian goddess Inanna was identified as Venus. She was the Lady of Life. But in her terrible aspect, she became a dragon-like flame in the sky. The texts say, like a dragon, you have deposited venom on the land, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation. Inanna became a roaring storm. She devastated the land. Mankind comes before you in fear and trembling at your tempestuous radiance, the texts say. Inanna's Babylonian counterpart Ishtar was also identified as Venus. She was the shining torch of heaven and earth. Furious and irresistible onslaught. I rain down like flame. The Egyptian goddess Sekhmet has the same attributes. She takes the form of the fiery Uraeus serpent. She becomes a flame of fire in her tempest, a star scattering its flame and fire. Sekhmet herself says, the fear of me is in their hearts, and the awe of me is in their hearts. No one at all can approach her, the coffin texts say. The streams behind her are flames of fire. The astonishing fact is that goddesses everywhere exhibit this terrifying cometary. The Hindu Kali and Durga, the Greek Aphrodite, Athena, Medusa, and countless others. And of course you can add numerous counterparts in the New World, from the Incan goddess Chaska to the Aztec goddess Xochiquetzal to the legendary Nokomis of North American Indian tribes. The serpent or dragon is an unexplained mythical archetype. There's nothing like it anywhere in the biological world. And yet the same recurring features will be found in cultures the world over. The dragon's disheveled hair and shaggy beard.
Alright guys, I'm about to get up out of here. Go chill in the living room for a little while. I might stream some video games and I might not. It's almost 5 o'clock. Alright. I'll get with you guys later. Peace till next time.